Welcome back to Cinema Synopsis. Today I'll be explaining a science fiction action movie called 2012. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care.
In 2009, American scientist Adrian travels to a copper mine in India run by his friend Satnam. Satnam has just discovered that the Earth's core temperature is rising at an accelerated rate. Helmsley travels 20 hours non-stop to make it to the fundraiser gathering in Washington, D.C. to tell the Chief of Staff Carl about the discovery. Carl tells him that Helmsley will now report directly to him and in turn takes him directly to President Wilson. In 2010, President Wilson informs the other heads of state during the G8 summit about the impending disaster that has been verified by their brightest minds. Meanwhile, someone is being informed that a ticket for a seat on the boat would be 1 billion euros. In China, many people were moved to another location so that the area could be used to manufacture what they were being told is a dam for the impending floods. One Chinese worker tells his family, his brother a monk, and his grandparents that he will send them money. In 2012, the story begins with the protagonist, writer, and limo driver Jackson rushing out to pick up his kids Lily and Noah for a trip to Yellowstone National Park. There, they cross a restricted area, and their path is followed by Charlie. As they walk across what used to be a lake but now is a hotspot, they are intercepted by military personnel and they meet Dr. Helmsley, who, as it turns out, read Jackson's book. Later, they are dropped off at the encampment, while Dr. Helmsley receives word that the original timeline was off. The impending disaster is to strike sooner. At the encampment, Jackson tries to find out more information about the restricted area and is instead distracted by Charlie. There, he finds out information about the possible impending disaster and that those who've tried to communicate the information to the masses were mysteriously killed. Charlie then tells Jackson of a map that was given to him that would lead to a location of supposed spaceships that were being built as a way to save mankind from the disaster. The next day, Jackson's ex-wife Kate is in a supermarket with her new boyfriend. A crack erupts through the supermarket, splitting it in two. Kate immediately calls Jackson home with the kids, cutting the camping trip short. Elsewhere, in Vegas, Yuri, who's a billionaire, gives some words of encouragement to his boxer before a fight. However, during the match, Yuri receives a message about the necessity of boarding the ship and leaves before the match. Jackson makes it home with the kids and receives a phone call from Yuri to pick up his twin boys and take them to the private plane. As Jackson drops the kids off, one of the boys taunts Jackson that they have tickets to a ship to live in and that he will die. Further arousing Jackson's suspicion about the impending doom, Jackson notices another crack erupting beneath and immediately rents out a small plane and heads back to his ex-wife's home to pick up his family and leave California. Kate, on the phone with Jackson as he's on his way to pick them up, insists that everything is fine until the house begins to quake and Jackson arrives to pick up his ex-wife, her boyfriend, and the kids and head back to the airport. After a car rushing through the impeding earthquake disaster around them, they arrive at the airport only to find the pilot, and immediately Gordon is called upon to fly the plane. As Gordon flies the plane out of Los Angeles, all on board watch in horror as the city disappears into the Pacific Ocean. Running low on fuel, they stop at Yellowstone National Park and Jackson decides to find Charlie to pick up the map that would tell them where these spaceships are. Finding the trailer, Jackson and his daughter Lily could not find the man anywhere, only to realize he is standing on top of the mountain to witness the approaching doom. Driving to Charlie, Jackson gains information about where the map is located and immediately drives back to the airstrip as Yellowstone caldera erupts, killing Charlie. Meanwhile, in Vatican City, the Italian Prime Minister, his family, and many others are in prayer as St. Peter's Basilica is destroyed by an earthquake, killing the Pope and many others in prayer. In flight, Jackson and his family realized that they need a bigger plane to make it to China, where the ships are located, and stop in Las Vegas only to run into Yuri, his son's girlfriend Tamara, and the pilot trying to take off. Eventually, the pilot Sasha, with Gordon as co-pilot, flies the plane out of the airport as Las Vegas is destroyed around them. Dr. Helmsley and Karl Anhauser hunt down the president at a chapel, only for the president to dismiss all except Helmsley. There, he informs Helmsley of his decision to stay behind, because one young scientist is worth more than 20 old politicians. Dr. Helmsley boards the Air Force One and informs all present that the president decided to stay behind. And with that information, the vice president has also passed, and that the Speaker of the House, untrackable, Karl Anheuser, assumes control as Commander-in-Chief and boards Air Force One to head to China. Later, the first daughter, Laura Wilson, connects with her father to find out his decision of staying behind. Reports of tsunamis coming from all over the globe. Dr. Helmsley zeroes in on an area where the cruise ship his father is playing on and mourns the death of his father. Meanwhile, President Wilson is at the White House helping others and is also hit by the waves of the Atlantic Ocean. And Dr. Helmsley also finds out that his friend from India was never picked up by airlift and also died in a tsunami. In Tibet, the young monk Nima talks to his elder about information that he received from his brother and is granted permission to take the pickup truck to take his grandparents to where his elder brother is in the mountains. In the air, on the Antonov, all aboard discover that Hawaii is up in flames, and they are running low on fuel. Deciding to head to the South China Sea, they put on life preservers and prepare for a water landing. Later, they realize that they are actually flying over the Himalayas and decide on a mountain landing. As Sasha forces the plane to land, everyone else on board piles into a Bentley and flies out the back, down like a snow raft, only to watch the plane take a nosedive off the cliff, killing Sasha. Eventually, the Chinese helicopters stop, but only pick up Yuri and his sons, because they have tickets to board the ship, leaving Jackson, his family, and Yuri's girlfriend Tamara behind. As Jackson and company walk through the mountains, they come across a pickup truck, also heading towards the ship, and wave them down to pick them up. It turns out that this is the young monk and his grandparents driving down to meet the elder brother to sneak onto the ships. Reaching the Arks, Nima talks to his elder brother Tenzin about the additional passengers and pleads to him to allow them to come along. Meanwhile, Air Force One has landed and Dr. Helmsley and the first daughter realize that the Arks were constructed to save the heads of state, hand-picked individuals that were chosen to aid the repopulation of Earth, and those wealthy enough to pay the €1 billion ticket per person. Helmsley and the first daughter are aghast that no one else was given the opportunity to try to make it onto the Arks, and were immediately shot down when the notion of mass chaos looms as a possibility. Many individuals, including Yuri and his sons, are not allowed onto the Arks, because one of the completed arcs suffered damage during the earthquakes. After Yuri punches out a guard, everyone runs to the docks and screams for help as the ark's gate closes shut. Dr. Helmsley delivers an impassioned speech about letting others onto the ark by quoting Jackson Curtis's book, and eventually convinces everyone to allow everyone else on board. The arks open the gates, allowing everyone left behind to come in. Yuri was stuck underneath the gate until it rose up, and Yuri pushes one son up and then tosses the other son up, but in doing so, falls to his death. Jackson and company managed to sneak on board one of the arcs only to be separated when the gates started to close, losing Gordon and injuring Tenzin as compartments start to flood. Jackson's daughter Lily is separated from the rest of the group, and Yuri's girlfriend Tamara drowns after being closed in. Everyone else is further behind as the welding device used to open the hatch is stuck in the gears, not allowing the arc to close its gates completely, thus not allowing the arc to start its engine. Dr. Helmsley and Anheuser zero in on the problem as to why the gate won't close shut, and Helmsley with Laura and one other run to where Jackson and his group are to fix the problem. After finding Lily and connecting with Jackson, Helmsley informs Jackson that something is stuck in the gears and that it needs to be unstuck before the arc could move safely. Jackson volunteers to go back, and eventually his son Noah follows him into the gears, where the welding device was left behind between the gears. Back at the bridge, the first impact of the waves hit the arcs, and the parked Air Force One damages the anchor, causing it to head on a crash course towards Mount Everest. Eventually, Noah and his father dislodge the welding device from the gears, allowing the gate to close shut, and the engines are allowed to run, although the arc does hit Mount Everest. The impact is minor because the engine started moving in reverse. Later on, the 21st day, we find that Laura Wilson has just completed reading Jackson Curtis's book, and she and Dr. Helmsley embark on a relationship. Dr. Helmsley is called to the bridge, and it is discovered that the floods had receded, and everyone is allowed outside to breathe the fresh air. We find that Jackson and his ex-wife Kate have reconciled, their children are happy, and they seem to be good friends with Yuri's sons. It is discovered that Africa rose in the sea level and is the first mass of land to be dry, so the ark charts a course and headed to Africa.